Welcome back to Central University. This is Core 52, and we are on chapter 23, entitled The Cross. It begins with Matthew 16, verses 24 and 25, when he says, Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." There is some great stuff, both some historical background information in this chapter, as well as just some incredible theology about the cross. I want to zero in on something that's kind of near and dear to my heart when it comes to speaking about the cross. And you'll find most of it on the last page of this chapter, which is page 158. Let me read some of this. Like Jesus' death, our suffering and sacrifice have saving power, not for the individual soul, but for the society as a whole. As Jesus died to atone for our personal sins, so we died to reverse the effects of sin in society, families, and communities. What Mark Moore begins to talk about as he works along in this chapter is he begins to help us understand how what Brennan Manning would say is that the cross of Christ is not just a symbol of our salvation, but it's a pattern for our lives. Mark Moore here says that when we, like Jesus, we learn how to suffer, how to sacrifice, that it has great power, not just for the individual soul, but for society as a whole. In learning to sacrifice, in learning about sacrificial love, we can reverse the effects of sin in society, families, and communities. He says, we know this is true because we have a track record that's impressive. Beginning with the first century church, the greatest social strides in culture, art, medicine, compassion, education, poverty relief, and the protection of women, children, and the marginalized have come primarily from those who follow Jesus with crosses strapped to their backs. I love the encouraging words here, that when we learn to follow Jesus and we learn to follow his example of what it means to love and to serve and to take up our cross and follow him, that our track record throughout history is amazing. An incredible amount of good has been done. An incredible amount of redemptive work has been accomplished throughout humanity by followers of Jesus. Followers of Jesus who realize that Jesus' death on the cross was a pattern for us to follow. This circles back to our original question: who do you say Jesus is? If he's merely a prophet from the past, a hero of our faith, we likely have missed the purpose of the Messiah. Suffering and sacrifice are his greatest achievements. I want to read that again. Suffering and sacrifices are his greatest achievements. As his disciple, they will be yours as well. If we confess him as Lord, we're obligated to follow his example. We can't celebrate a Lord we won't imitate. Those are the last few words of this chapter. And you're not going to probably find more powerful words in this book than those words. Speaking of Jesus, suffering and sacrifice are his greatest achievements. As his disciple, they will be yours as well. If we confess him as Lord, we're obligated to follow his example. And incredibly powerful words about the life that we have been called to. Another preacher that I follow and read a lot of says this, preacher out of Missouri named Brian Zond. He says, if we see the cross as only what Christ does for us, his substitutionary death, and not also as the way of co-suffering love that we are all called to follow, imitation, we have profoundly misunderstood the message of Jesus. So for you and me right now, what do we need to hear? We need to hear that the cross in which we celebrate and we think so much about, it's not just about our salvation. It's about the pattern for our lives. We're to wake up each day, pick up our cross, and follow Jesus. Pick up our cross, die to ourselves, be willing to suffer, be willing to sacrifice, be willing to serve in every way possible. That's how we follow Jesus. That's the way we become Christ-like. All of this other blabber and jabber and books about being blessed and all of that stuff, listen, all of that stuff, there's so much selfishness and self-gratification in that. You want to follow Jesus? Jesus told you how. Pick up your cross and follow him.